came to visit Ashton Court on an open day in the autumn of 2020 with the view to perhaps holding a film show in the spring of 2021. As we toured the building, we realised it was also a great filming location. Late in the tour, we fell into conversation with Catherine Chiswell-Jones, who is the manager for Art Space, Life Space, the managers of the building, and she suggested we took a 2-week residency and used the building as our studio. But then the second round of COVID struck and the whole thing was put on ice. However, once it became apparent that by the summer it might be possible to proceed, we then rebooked the residency to August, and we managed to negotiate the whole of August, which was gave us much more flexibility, which was great. We had the exclusive use of the refectory as our room, which we could do what we liked in, and then we had free rein in the other rooms unless they happened to be booked by somebody else. And we had specific bookings for the big rooms so that we definitely had them guaranteed. To plan the residency, about 11 of us met in the garden of the Channings Hotel in Clifton, and which was where we hammered out all the scripts that we would actually be capable of filming, what was practical, what was not practical, how we were going to do it, who was going to be responsible for various tasks and so forth. And that planning meeting was really successful because after then the project had real momentum and it was moving along. We knew we were going to churn out these films. We had to think, how would we actually use our residency? Now, whilst we had various scripts in stages of development, some of which needed studio space, we decided we should really make films that took full advantage of the building itself. Well, the obvious one to do was to make a documentary which was put in hand, and then we looked around and thought, what does this inspire in us?
A number of scripts were sent out to club members to look at, to fill that particular month of August at Ashton Court. And the one script that stood out for me was Falling Back. It was a two-hander, pretty much all in one room, one room of the building. And it was about a confrontation between two British soldiers, a general and an ordinary soldier, in a chateau in France. Just before Dunkirk. The building lent itself beautifully to that type of a film. The issue was that it came just at the end of the pandemic, and we were trying to find two suitable actors to play the part, knowing that we couldn't really see them or interview them or do anything in terms of costume directly. We had to do it all on Zoom. Or just with measurements or whatever. So that was a problem. The one guy that played the soldier was an ex-guy from St Paul's Players who now lives in Bournemouth. And he managed to see it. I don't know how he saw it, but he managed to find out that we were doing it. And he rang me up and said, I'd love to play the part. Well, I knew he was good and I didn't need to screen test him. I knew what he could do. And then we managed to get hold of a guy from another drama group in Bristol, who was just getting over, I think, COVID himself. So there were some issues there. But we had a couple of read-throughs on Zoom, which went very, very well indeed. And once we decided that we were set and ready to go, we had to obviously hire the costumes. And that was an issue with getting all the measurements out, getting them off to the agency that provide them, getting the club to agree to pay for them. because there was a rental charge. We had to hire guns and all sorts of stuff with it. But I think when you see the film, you'll realise that it was well worthwhile, because I think the costumes themselves are they're authentic. Or both of the actors really felt that they were in the part because of the costumes themselves. We decided to get there quite early, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we would try and do what we could within the day and see how it went. We eventually managed to get outside to do a few of the shots with the soldier approaching the chateau, which actually went relatively well, although there are still some people in some of the shots when you start looking at the clips, but we can sort those out. And we were able to get some lovely shots of him approaching the building and get in for around about 10 o'clock. We were kind of up and running to go with the inside shots. And in the end, it went relatively well, I think. We didn't have too many kind of technical issues. And I think probably we finished in the end about 6:30, which was, I think it was about 6:30 in the evening. Just enough time for me to buy everybody a pint, of course. Yeah, we finished about 6:30 and we were able to clear up and move on. And I think we pretty much got everything we wanted.
I just found the history of the place so interesting and amazing. The stories of the families that used to live there and the history of the building would make a brilliant, interesting documentary, and it hasn't been done before. So one of the reasons Art Space, Life Space provided us with the residency was they were keen on us making a documentary. My work on the documentary was a huge learning curve, because the more research resulted in more confusion, and even the experts couldn't decide what was right and what was wrong. So mainly in the script, it's like probably, the word probably and maybe turns up quite a lot in the film, because nobody knows for sure. The script took me about 10 attempts, pulling my hair out with it all. And it started off as a docudrama. Then realised that there was going to be a problem with the actors, getting actors and costumes and everything. So then it was suggested to use puppets. And then it was an everyman, so we needed one actor to play the main character throughout the film. But finally, we came to the decision to make it into a documentary about the house, and using a presenter, not a voiceover, to give it some personality.
Yeah. Then you walk back in here, you see that door, so that is not a door, that's a door. Another door, that is a door.
I've got another door which is not a door.
Yeah.
The main problem with our wonderful presenter was that she could only make it for one day. Even though we had the whole month of August to film it in, we only had one day to do it. So that was very stressful because we had to rush it through, which I wasn't happy about. And she was excellent. She does a voiceover and comments to the camera. So we were doing the dialogue while we're setting up the rooms to film in. So it was rush, rush, rush. It was very stressful.
Where are the other 8 window bays?
Once more. Bless you. Right.
That's not right.
My shooting schedule went flying out the window after 5 minutes. There was another film being made at the same time, so that didn't help, and another resident in a room, which didn't help either. So it was rush, 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 rush. But she coped really well. We had a brilliant camera and lots of help. So eventually we got most of it done. The inside anyway. We've still got the outside to do.
It is when is a door not a door. Okay.
When is a door not a door?
So John Hugh Smith. Did you do Smith?
I wonder if that gave him inspiration.
Well, the main problem I found was time, or the lack of it. So in hindsight, next time I will ensure that we'll have at least 2 days to do the filming, which hopefully will ensure a good quality, interesting film with a happy crew and director. Now to do the editing.
Another idea, and the most obvious one, was a haunted house. And in fact, actually, we made several films in the end with a slight haunting theme. Myself, I looked at the building and I thought, what could we do with this, this big building? And I had this idea of a man who perhaps been stationed here during the war. And I was walking back through the building because these buildings were used, including this one, during the war. Action. And then for some reason it sort of drifted into the Bletchley Park type idea. So I thought, well, perhaps this building was used as a sort of Bletchley Park type thing. So all it would consist of is this elderly gentleman who we had a good actor for, walking through the building with his reminiscences of his wartime years. There is a twist at the end.
I was quite keen to get my granddaughter, who's very heavily into amateur dramatics, and she's only 9. She goes to Stagecoach, and I wanted to find something that I could shoot with her because she's very, very keen to do that sort of thing. And Graham came up with the idea of the Smuggler's Song, which is a Rudyard Kipling poem, effectively. And it's out of copyright, so I understand. So we thought, well, that would be ideal because it's set around 1700, 1750, and we could just shoot it with a voiceover. And we had a day there shooting these various scenes.
What's that like? No, it's not high enough, is it?
No, it's
They were quite difficult to put together in some ways because a lot of it are night scenes. So effectively then we were having to get moonlight and then also candlelight and various structures.
yeah, it's looking good.
The hands are in focus, right?
Yes, yeah, the hands are focused.
Shadows, lots of shadows, because there's a lot of sort of, you know, don't look here and don't look there, and this might be happening, but don't tell anybody about it, and this sort of thing going on. So, but she was absolutely stunning. She was terrific. She didn't take much to just mention one thing to her, and she just did it, and she did an absolutely super job of it. Graham originally asked me if I wanted to direct it. But I wasn't too comfortable with that, and I hadn't really given it a great deal of thought as to how we were going to construct all these various shots. So in the end, we decided to do it as a joint collaboration. That in itself's got its issues because I think you really need, in any film, you need one person to make the decisions. And if you've got a couple of people making decisions or trying to make decisions and arguing about it, potentially, that is not a good recipe for making a good film. My granddaughter, who's, as I say, 9, she said to Jane afterwards, she said, "Do Graham and Steve really know what they're doing?"
Well, it was very much a co-production with Steve, this one, because it was one that Steve really put his heart and soul into, and I think that as time went by, my role diminished in the film, and Steve's increased, and because he then took in hand the filming of all the shots that we couldn't shoot actually in Ashton Court. But we have worked together before on a number of productions, and so we have a great love-hate relationship. Sometimes when you look around a building, you get inspired with a sort of idea, and somehow the upstairs of this building, with its semi-ruins, reminded me of a poetry film, which I couldn't actually remember the name of, but with a bit of Googling, I came up with it, and it's called The Listeners by Walter de la Mare. It's about a traveller who turns up at a house that apparently is empty, though there's some doubt about this. It's quite a famous poem. And then I looked it up, and I realised it was still in copyright, so I thought, oh, that's a bit of a bind. But then I wondered, was it possible to make an interpretation of it without actually having the words? So it's about a traveller who rides up on his horse and bangs on the door. So what's the modern version of a horse? Well, it's a motorbike. So in our version, there's no recantation of the poem, it's just inspired by it. So we're trying to create a creepy atmosphere at dusk, and this motorcyclist is banging on a door. "Tell them I came. Is there anybody there?" And we don't know if this will work. It's what you class as an experimental film.
The idea came actually about because of a lockdown. I was trying to think of things to do, a structure in my life while nothing was happening. And I knew that there was a course going on, an online course on script writing. So I haven't done much script writing, to be honest. I've done a lot of writing for corporate videos and things like that, but I had never written a drama of any kind. So I joined this group, which of course inevitably meant I had to come up with a story. Which I struggled with a long time. I had lots of ideas floating around, guardian angel type films. And increasingly I thought, well, actually, when I heard that Ashton Court was going to be available, an Ashton Court mansion for us to be filming in, I started to think about the future of Ashton Court. And we had discussed previously, maybe the club would be doing a documentary on the future of it, because it's a scary prospect, a lot of money that no one is easily going to spend on it. And so I actually thought, well, maybe we could bring that into the storyline slightly. So I came up with a kind of initial plot. Small boy looks up, there's something going on in this old giant mansion that he lives in, and that cuts then to a modern day. And we have the owner of this vast house turning up. It gets revealed when he meets an estate agent character that it's shortly to be sold. But he hasn't been in the place for 40 years. But there's some things and some items from the past that they've obviously gathered in this empty giant mansion. And that nudges his memories. And it's quite clear that he had a sister who disappeared. Something to do with a father, might have been something to do with it. It's an unhappy memory. But then he hears something in the house. Hello? And so now we shift into a classic sort of ghost story sort of mode. When he finally locates her, wandering, rambling around the whole place. He then discovers that the father presence is still there. She is a ghost, the father's a ghost, this evil sort of presence. And essentially what he has to do is have the courage to stand up to his father to get the ghost removed and the evil presence. Obviously, in the storyline, the house is a kind of character to some extent. And that's, I think, all of us who were filming at Ashton Court were very aware that this was not a place that we were just going to put up kind of scenes and just use it as a set, a manufactured set. What we actually wanted to do was use the house. And I think probably of all the films, mine probably used the most rooms and the most elements. And the one that was unusual was that I wanted to try and use the atmospheric upstairs areas. And I had an imagination in my mind. I imagined it would be easier than it actually turned out to be. When you actually get up to the upper floors of Ashton Court, there's a lot of rubble, there's a lot of dust. There's even some talk that, in some rooms you can't even get to because there's asbestos and things like that. So we had to be really cautious about how we were going to use it. But it was such an extraordinary set that it was worth really kind of utilising. And I think the idea came in my mind that if the girl ghost was going to be around, she was going to be up there because no one would spot her. No one goes up there, so that's where she can be, and that's where the father can be, and so it's kind of, in effect, that's where they live. And as we filmed it, it was more a question of which rooms could we use for which scenes and which sequences. At one point, we were going from room to room to room, and I realised that actually we're going to spend a lot of time in one of these very dusty rooms. And I thought that wasn't good. That wasn't good for any of the characters. And at one point, Dave said we could light this area up, and it was the downstairs area where there's a bar and these extraordinary pillars. And the extraordinary pillars, of course, are the inside of a winter garden which has got filled in. So it's got an extraordinary atmosphere. And then the way that Dave had lit it was just really spooky. Tim is trying to look for his sister, and he's wandering around, turns the corner, and then you walk into a room, of course, which is carpeted. And it reminded, as I looked at it, I thought, this is fine. We can do this, but we can do this because it's a dream, because it's a ghost. In effect, it isn't just her who's created this magic world. It's her room is also. The house has its own atmosphere, but it really had its limitations because so much of it you couldn't film for long periods in. So we got an element of the chaos of this ruined place, but we did an awful lot of the filming in the end in the safer areas that have been renovated and are definitely less dusty and things like that. The challenge was having two young actors, and one was in many respects just naturally exactly the right character. And actually, when you asked her just to remain calm, you're a ghost who doesn't talk, you know, she actually got it. She understood. But I think we're just lucky that she was naturally someone who seemed like a calming influence. The young boy was more inexperienced, and I think it was more of a challenge for him to play the young Hugo, the young character. And at one point, there was an intriguing moment which I do think about. Probably the only best bit, the only real bit of direction I did in the whole week, probably or week or two, which actually worked. Was that at one point he had to exclaim something, and he had to sort of really get shocked and scared about something, and very annoyed. And so I discovered he was a Bristol City supporter, and I said, imagine what it feels like, and it's the last minute, and you were 1-0 up, and then they score in the last minute, and you just want to shout, no. Now just hold that in your head and just do it. And he did it, and this enormous no came out. And I thought, actually, if I'd done anything right on this filming, that was a good bit of direction. The rest of it was just trying to, in my mind, let actors do their own thing. I mean, two reasons. One, I'm not an experienced director, so I can't tell them exactly how to do that. I haven't had years of experience. Secondly, they're doing it for fun. They want to enjoy doing it. You've got to give them that space. So Tim, if he wants to create a backstory, which he did in his head, then great, you go for it. And in the end, you might have an idea of how it's going to pan out, but you have a little go. If I don't like it, I'll suggest you tone it down or bring it up or do something. But I'd much rather have them, enjoy and come out with what they're doing, because I think it's just going to feel better for them and probably come out with a better result in the end. And they were perfect. Caroline was perfect in the role. Tim, I think probably a more varied role than he's played in many things I've seen. Turning from a bastard to a whimpering small 10-year-old, as it were. Quite a climb. If we had Oscars, I'm sure he's going to be up for them.
I'm so sorry. I tried to protect you, but I was a coward. After you'd gone, he said I was never to speak of you again. I have to know. Did he kill you? Oh, I hate him! And this house! The sooner it's gone, the better. I know you love the house, but... he's still here, isn't he?
Cut. I have to say, though, that unless you start out with a desire to create something fantastic, I don't see the point, really. I'm an all or nothing person, really. And so this may or may not be the only ever film I ever produce, due to the reaction from the public, no doubt.
We would really like to thank Artspace Lifespace for inviting us to take the residency at Ashton Court Mansion and to give us a double residency of 1 month. It was absolutely fantastic. In particular, I'd like to thank Catherine Chiswell-Jones for being the original suggester and inviter of us to join them at the mansion. It has absolutely been a terrific experience.
39.
But the majority of preserved buildings are simply old. That was complete mess.
Would you care to explain to the camera what you're doing?
Right, we're just going to do a close-up of a wheel going through the frame. Right.